would like to take the opportunity to welcome you to Kuwait. And also, today we are launching our collaborative work which we have done in the last over 12 months. This has not been an easy ride for all of us, especially in Kuwait, in trying to see how we can change the health system in the country, or help the government to change the health system. What is important is that we have been successful to connect all the primary health cares, which are at the one governorate, connected to a new hospital and to Dusman electronically. That is the first time ever happening in Kuwait that such a system exists. And this would not have been possible without the very hard work and collaboration with our colleagues and our staff and the ministry staff in Kuwait in order to this happen. This is the beginning of the changes we are going to bring, and we are hoping that by the end of this year, many more governorates will be connected. So soon, which is for me the few months is only soon, that we will be able to have the whole Kuwait connected, and will be the first country in the region that will have this connectivity, and to the which will include a lot of advantages of efficiency, healthcare provision in a different way to the public. Now that is not enough. And I think we have already, as you know, most of you know, that we have started also training and giving the knowledge to the providers of the healthcare. And by next month, we will start actually training the public and giving the information to the public. I'm very pleased that this has happened. It's a day which is very important in my lifetime, and I'm very happy to see that our collaborators are all here, and we will be hoping that Kuwait in a few years from now will be a model for the use of the electronic health record and use of the technology in the health.
Good afternoon, everyone. I regret that I'm unable to be with you in person today to mark this very auspicious occasion to launch the first joint collaborative educational program between Kuwait and Scotland, which supports one of our key objectives to enhance the opportunity for the development of healthcare education within Kuwait. I know by now you will be well into the course program, and I am very grateful to our colleagues in Scotland for their tremendous support in developing these initial 3 unique modular courses under the banner of the University of Dundee: Certificate, Diploma, MSc in Diabetes Care and Education. And to the dedicated team in Kuwait, which has resulted in approximately 90 students here today, and I wish you every success with your studies. While talking about the Kuwait-Scotland initiative, this also can be seen in a number of other areas to provide innovations in the healthcare system and patterns of healthcare within Kuwait, and to show the benefits of integrated health records. We now have a live interactive system for patient record between all public healthcare facilities within the capital government, and this will become nationwide within the coming months. This means we are able to provide real-time patient information to support primary and secondary care, and to enable the point of delivery to be on a domestic or primary healthcare level, and in so doing provide healthcare in the most time-efficient and cost-effective manner. This joint initiative program will continue to develop through education and clinical services, including the development of clinical guidelines, treatment pathways, and clinical informatics. Finally, this effort would not have been possible without the collaboration of the staff of the Ministry of Health, Dusman Diabetes Institute, and our other partners like Dundee and Waridia. We also look forward to continue collaboration with our partners to develop any other further healthcare activities. Thank you, and I wish you every success within the program.
It's my pleasure to help launch the next phase of the Kuwait Scotland eHealth innovation today with the Minister for Health in Kuwait. The health systems in Scotland and Kuwait have much in common: a unified health system, a primary care system acting as a cornerstone of care, and a focus on quality. In Scotland, we have a quality strategy that recognises that a person's experience of health care is about much more than speedy treatment. It is the quality of care they get that matters most to them. We measure this through the experience of patients, carers and staff, and the information about the quality of the entire care journey is used to drive up standards. I'm delighted that the Kuwait-Scotland collaboration will support the work we're doing to encourage people to be partners in their own care. We believe that this will result in improvements in the things people have said they want from their health service. These things include caring and compassionate treatment, clear communication and explanation, effective collaboration with the clinician, a clean and safe care environment and continuity of care, all supported by clinical excellence. I believe these principles apply to healthcare internationally, and I'm therefore thrilled that colleagues in Kuwait and Scotland are working together in such a comprehensive programme to drive forward the quality of education, clinical care, clinical skills and research. I hope the Kuwait-Scotland eHealth Innovation Network will make an important contribution to giving the people of Scotland and Kuwait a new confidence in the quality of their care. That's what the network is all about. I'm deeply impressed by the vision of the Dasman Diabetes Institute and the Ministry of Health, and I know that the collaboration is greatly valued by my colleagues here in Scotland. I wish you well with the launch and look forward to seeing many of you in Scotland very soon as we learn more together about how education, clinical networks and the use of e-health can support the highest quality healthcare services in each of our two countries.
Kevin, for those kind words. And on behalf of Scotland, may I say, Mahaba Beacon. I just want to spend 2 minutes talking about how much myself and my colleagues in Scotland value this collaboration, and also to emphasise that this is a package, and what we think is really quite a unique package of care and intervention, which we think will help transform the way we deliver healthcare in Scotland and Kuwait. And the Kuwait-Scotland eHealth Innovation Network is really trying to gear both countries to be in a prime position to deliver diabetes care, education and research underpinned by an informatics framework. And Scotland is really very like Kuwait. Our populations are similar. We share the ability to use a common, unique patient identifier to track episodes of healthcare across the journey of care of individual patients. Healthcare is free at the point of care. We have this blend of primary care centres and hospitals working together to care for people with chronic diseases. And lastly, you'll know that neither Kuwait nor Scotland have won the Football World Cup yet. But if you're free tomorrow night, we're having our own unofficial World Cup, where we, my colleagues in Scotland, are going to challenge the Dasman Diabetes Institute, and we would really encourage a huge support to cheer us on. And as you know, our national dress is different. I show this picture because this is our Dean, John Connell, who didn't enter into the spirit of the occasion on this great event at Washington. So what is this unique package? I think we've made an excellent start. Earlier in the year, we said we would deliver 10 things in 2011. And we had our partnership meeting this morning, and I think there's really concrete evidence that we're making great headway in all aspects of the collaboration. Education, which is the theme of today, the electronic health record, developing a clinical network underpinned by key. But we have come a long way in terms of discovery courses, our informatics work, as well as the education and research. Just to focus on the informatics for a moment, to echo Dr. Kazem's word, we are really thrilled that the capital region is now connected. And this will provide a fantastic platform and infrastructure upon which we can deliver care pathways, education and research initiatives.
It was a very contentious building because it, oddly enough, very unusual for public buildings, cost an awful lot more than was intended at the outset. It's very unusual for public buildings, that isn't it? Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to officially launch the educational programme. Slightly tricky because we started on Saturday morning. In fact, many of the students started before that, doing introductory and preparatory work. But nonetheless, many of them are here today and will be here, those that couldn't manage will be here at 4 o'clock today and they'll work on to 8. But before I started talking about the educational programme, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an understanding about the context in which we have located educational programmes, both in Scotland and clearly here in Kuwait. Because as Andrew said, the similarities between our two countries are really quite significant in this respect. As long ago as 2009, it does really feel like as long ago, Scotland made a major philosophical change around the approach to healthcare. And that was, in this particular report, which was Delivering for Health, which was a commitment to shaping the service around the needs of patients, particularly with long-term conditions, as opposed to the previous philosophy, which was all about really dealing with acute episodic care. And at that time we had a government that put in place Delivering for Health, which was such an important paper, and there's the Minister of the Times quote for it, that it was endorsed by all the political parties in the Parliament at that time. And when the Scottish National Party came in, they continued with it in Better Health, Better Care. And in this particular administration, they are continuing again. So we have a solid basis on which to build our education and training programmes around the philosophy of what care needs to look like, and therefore what we need to do to train our healthcare professionals. So that's a very important part of what we're doing. Because, like you, we all live in a very challenging environment. Apart from the increase in the ageing population, there is, of course, a significant increase in not just long-term conditions, but also complex comorbidity. And because we've moved to a team-working approach to meet the needs of these patients, we couldn't do anything else because we can't do it any other way. The needs are so great. We now have a very complex world in which we operate, with lots of people doing very good jobs across the service, and really great challenges about keeping us all together. And the approach again in Scotland is to make sure that care is joined up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that as well. Andrew mentioned that the electronic health record is a really key part of that. The other thing that we have ahead of the primary care, the family medicine training programme here in Kuwait. But Kuwait and Scotland have a very, very strong primary care system. And because I'm a general practitioner, I would of course say that the jewel in the crown is general practitioners. But general practitioners are part of a team, and I do acknowledge that. Kuwait was one of the first countries in the world to establish the membership of the Royal College of GPs exam, international. And so you have general practitioners trained here, family medicine doctors, to exactly the same standard as they are trained in the UK. And this was a paper that David Kerr and I wrote for the New England Journal at the time that President Obama was trying to bring about major healthcare reform. And for those of you not involved, for those of us in the UK, the NHS was at that time cast in terrible light as being dreadful for patients, long waiting times, and just a terrible way to deliver care. Forgetting, of course, the fact that the NHS is actually a care that delivers care to all, as opposed to what the American healthcare system does. But one of the things that we wanted to pick up on was, as Dr. Kazim said, the importance of prevention and health screening in a programme, because yes, it's an awful lot better to look after people before they become ill and support them in that, in keeping their health good and free of disease, than it is for looking after them once they are unfortunately already ill, and many of them with long-term conditions. And the other thing is that general practitioners, of course, only refer patients who need a specialist opinion, and 86% of healthcare can then be delivered in the community. This is very important because, of course, resources are finite, and for all of us, no matter what system you work in. The final, of course, important part of this is that all of the things that we offer are about patient satisfaction and health outcomes. And that's the key, as Nicola Sturgeon said, to what we look for in an improving healthcare system. So this is the world in which we started, looking at the educational needs of the people of Kuwait back in August 2010. Such a short time ago for the amount that we have done. We're all saying that, but it really is true. So what we wanted to do in the beginning was to use our expertise in education and experience of long-term condition or chronic disease management with the managed clinical network of NHS Side to create an educational programme that would be integral to the system-wide strategy for the improvement of care. And so that would include education, research, clinical services and informatics. And this is what we then very quickly realised that we needed. We needed a much wider programme that would look at all other sorts of things, including the need to engage with communities, professional groups, including the need to actually develop academics who could take part in research in the future. We needed to evaluate the programme as well, and we needed to make sure that all of that time we were staying in touch and coordinating with each other. And what we've done now, I will concentrate on the education programme, is that we have, with our partners here in Kuwait, we've set up an education faculty, and we're due to meet tomorrow. And the education faculty's purpose is to keep us on track, not just from an academic point of view, but also in order to meet the needs of people studying in Kuwait and how it links to the other healthcare training programmes that have already taken place. I've already mentioned the family medicine training programme, which is very important that we match into that. We have an academic staff in Dundee, increasing in numbers quite significantly, and we're just about to appoint educational support fellows who will help the students with pastoral support and guidance throughout the 3 years of their study as they go through to masters. As well as we're going to look at other people that we can bring into the programme to help with additional modules. We have an increasing administrative team which will help with course coordination and support for the learning zone that I'll talk about. And most importantly here we have also set up and it's busy being used, the clinical skills facility, which I think most of you have managed to go up and see, but if not, I'm sure colleagues would be very happy to show you around should you go up there. It's a very impressive facility. Now a little bit about the educational programme, particularly around the fact that this is quite different even for us in the UK. What we've put together is something that is flexible, adaptable, and is not perhaps as well recognised as the usual kind of concepts about what a postgraduate programme might look like in the UK. And I can assure you that this quote here by Woodrow Wilson is absolutely true. It is easier to change the location of a cemetery than it is to change a school curriculum. And my usual comment is you get probably more help from those within in the first than you do at times from the second. And so, as Dr. Kaظm said, at times this has not been an easy model to sell. But what we have put together is a learning programme based on outcomes, real outcomes, and I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. It's a credit level course and it's based on challenge. Our system is to base on the level of challenge, the level of difficulty for students, but challenge is a much better word and it doesn't upset students and scare them. And also notional hours of study. And it is in keeping with the European-wide move towards transferability. The idea is that people can move across the whole of the European Union, transferring their educational programmes around different parts of the system. But actually this is much more than European, it's really now an international approach to allowing people to move around within educational systems. And this is called the Bologna process. Now, anyone who's in education would probably, if you'd said Bologna 3 years ago, would just have burst into tears because it really did become a terribly complicated thing. But it really isn't that complicated. It's such a lovely name though, isn't it, Bologna? And clearly all the great thinking was taking place in Bologna. And when you see what Bologna looks like, it'd be quite easy to have great thoughts in Bologna. It's a bit more difficult to have great thoughts perhaps in Scunthorpe on a rainy afternoon, isn't it? But anyway, the idea is that the learning outcomes are a key part of what we put into the programme. And so the students, when they sign up for our modules, the first thing they meet is the intended learning outcomes. And we will teach to these outcomes, and more importantly, we will assess to these outcomes as well. But it's a statement of what the students expected to know, understand, and or be able to do and to demonstrate that they've acquired. So it's a very active thing. And it's a move away from the traditional kind of approach, which is just about the content and the teaching hours. to make it much more student-centred, because some students will work very quickly at their learning and others will take longer. And it doesn't, neither is right or wrong, it's just people have different styles. And equally, a student who works quickly through something in a particular topic might take much longer to work through something in a more challenging topic to them, or one that they have less experience of. So really, the important thing is to allow it to be student-centred. But the most important part, I think, of Bologna was that they did state quite clearly that not all learning outcomes are measurable. And if I go back to that Woodrow Wilson quote, that sometimes for educationalists is quite a hard thing to accept. The European Union can be mapped, and in Scotland we have the Scottish Qualification Authority has this Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework. And I really only put this up to let you see that the second from the top is the Masters, a level 11 programme, just to show the extent that all of our students are studying at level 11, okay, which is a very high level of study and very challenging intellectually and professionally for them. And the next level up is the doctoral study, and that's the highest they can do. Okay? And we hope that some of them will be able to go on and study for a doctorate. So what's the philosophy of this programme then? That's the kind of structure a little bit, but what's the philosophy? Well, the philosophy is very much based around the belief that people are intrinsically self-educating as long as the right information is presented in the right way at the right time. When I first went into education and training, I loved that quote. In fact, a very, very good friend of mine is Roger Neighbour, and I really liked it because I thought, well, that's so simple, isn't it? It's up to the students, therefore, to do the learning, because all you need to do is give them the right information the right way at the right time. And then I realised that actually the really tricky part is making sure that they do get it, the right information in the right way at the right time. And I think we work very hard to make sure that the students are working in a safe environment which allows them to be creative, to challenge, and at times also to admit their uncertainty about things. And you can only do that in a safe environment. We also believe that professionals are experiential learners, and the work of Kolb is very important in this, and the characteristics are there for you to see. But I'm not really going to go into them. All I'm really going to simply say that most of us get our experience in the workplace. Okay? We are professionals, we are dealing with patients day to day, and that kind of workplace-based experience is really the way we learn best. We learn from what we are doing and what we observe, and what we then go on and do. And patient stories are fascinating. We love patient stories as healthcare professionals. We share them all the time over coffee, over lunch, and we do them officially at meetings. But the patient stories are the most valuable part of learning in healthcare. We know that. They don't remember very much from the lecture. You will only remember 5% of what I've said to you. Bit of a shock, but there you are, okay? But if you go on and start to, in a discussion group, 50% of you will remember what took place. And if you go on to teaching, which is what we hope most of our students will actually go on to do in the years to come, in fact, most of them will remember what they're doing and take it on to another level once they start using it as teachers. So a very important philosophy is that people should learn by doing. And all of the modules on this course, the assignments, the assessments are two assignments, one of which is a workplace-based project. A real project in the real world. Reflection is the other thing that's very important. All the evidence shows that, well, in fact, there's almost no evidence to show that any kind of education and learning actually changes behaviour. That's not to say it doesn't, it's just, it's quite hard to measure. But there is evidence to show that reflecting on our experience is what changes our behaviour. So because of that, we put things in place around the second assignment, which is a reflective exercise for the students in order to reflect and so learn. And as I said, the evidence around reflection is quite compelling, and Donald Chon's work takes you through that. And if those students who are on Training the Trainers will be able to recognise this quite soon. The last point really to make in our philosophy is that every student is unique. These students we have come from a variety of different healthcare backgrounds, pharmacists, nutritionists, doctors, nurses, nurse educators, I could go on. And for every student, they want to be able to put together a learning programme that works best for them and their needs. So we've put together this rather turgid model that most people are absolutely sick of seeing. I do apologise for it, but it's really just to give you an idea that there is choices about progression through the programme. All of the things down the right-hand side, sorry about that, all of the things down the right-hand side are the modules that we've approved so far for the programme. We're clearly not running them all at once, by the way, in case you think we're really difficulty. We're running 4 at the moment, and we're about to submit another set of modules to the medical school. John Connell's about to get them soon, for additional topics that will be relevant to what people have asked us to do. So it's a progressive one to masters. Most people have opted to do that, and some can then go on to a doctorate study. Foundation phase. And the foundation phase included 2 discovery courses. The first was in March, and the second was in May. And I think some people are still in the room are so exhausted from the March one, which really was an enormous undertaking and hugely successful and lots of fun. The intention was that apart from kind of advertising the course and the programme, it was really to let students find out a little bit about us and how we teach and how we want them to learn, and also to find out how they would like us to present materials and programmes to them. And so I think we all hugely enjoyed learning together. Back and sitting in the back, and 160 delegates in May. And we think it was 105 workshops, we're not quite sure, but it's certainly in that range of figure. So the building was heaving with workshops going on. We had 26 keynotes, and in March we actually then went on, as if we weren't exhausted enough after 3 days, we went on and ran a research symposium on the 4th day to make sure we really were completely exhausted. But that was another fascinating day. Accepted 109 students to start in September. 23 have been accepted so far for February 2012, and the students can currently still apply for the February start, and then there'll be another date opening for the following programme. And 90 students started face-to-face teaching. The difference in numbers is that some people deferred start because they were doing things like going on holiday or having babies or some other excuse for not taking part in learning, so that we decided it was reasonable to let them defer till February. Students come from a range of backgrounds, and the academic staff equally come from a range of different backgrounds. And teaching is taking place again all over the building, but particularly in the clinical skills facility and in the new teaching and learning centre on level 2. We've also set up a very key part, an important key part of the programme, which is the learning zone, which sits within the KHN setup. To introduce students to this, we gave them some work to do. Seems like a great to start. We gave them lots of information, but we also asked them to do some work. So they had at least 6 or 7. Some of the students would probably tell me it was more than that, because some of the tasks were subdivided a little. But we asked them to carry out some introductory tasks, assignments, and submit them back to us in the learning zone. And almost all of them have done so, despite the odd glitch in different systems. And so the learning zone is a very important part of it. All the materials are posted there. Course materials are not printed out normally now, that students bring them along. They can access their tutors that way. They can have discussion forums set up to discuss things with other students. And the programme of study for them over the 10 weeks or 12 weeks of each module is documented on the learning zone, and the students will go there for all kinds of communications that we will have with them. They can access the library this way, they can access other resources, guidelines and standards. And another important part to say is there's an open learning zone where people who are not students can access many of the materials as well. So we're really delighted with the launch of the learning zone, and as I say, so far it seems to be very successful, and the students seem to be happy using it. It's a multidisciplinary approach, and one of the things that we hope to achieve is that we believe that if people learn together in teams, then they work well together in teams. The kind of silo approach of doctors learning with doctors, nurses with nurses, is no longer an appropriate way for people to learn. So this is a multidisciplinary programme, and all the modules have people from all disciplines in it. And the clinical skills is perhaps the clearest example where you can see the great benefits of this. As teams and shifting the balance of care from secondary into primary care can actually work well, because they can try out a lot of these things in simulation, in role play, with support, with tutor support. They can record these things, review the recordings, again work together, and a data bank can be set up of scenarios and simulations which will allow other people to come and learn from it, and even people remotely who can't come to the building and facility to be able to learn from it. So it's a really key part of the education and training programme that we offer, and indeed part of a modern healthcare education programme. People who will share an understanding of the skills required and, more importantly, a knowledge of how to teach these, and therefore they will start to, if you like, spread the good word in their own areas and beyond, and people will continue to come and access this facility. And at later times, some of the resources from the facility can be taken out to them so they can do it in their own workplace at a convenient time for them all. Again, working and learning in teams. And we're delighted, and we need to plan for the next 100 and the next 100. I didn't put up the cascade model. It now scares me because I think we said 100 the first year, 200 the second, and 400 the third. So I didn't put up that model. That does seem quite scary to me now. I'm sure it'll feel okay again in a month or two. But what we also need to do, we really do need to do and are very keen to do, is to build on the academic staff that we have to teach here in Kuwait. And as I said before, and I'll say it again to our students, we believe that many of you will become the academic staff here in Kuwait who will take on and run these programmes with us and then ultimately for us. As Dr. Kaaظm said, really in our grasp. The long-term outcomes are to benefit all of Kuwait. I'm so sorry. We want to have an international reputation as a regional leader in diabetes care and education, and part of that will be the National Clinical Skills Facility. We want to establish teams that will deliver standards of care and deliver real value for money, and patient safety will be secured through the standardisation of the approach that we all take. The benefits for patients, there's no doubt, is clear, that they will get a better experience through consistent safe standards of clinical skills and clinical practice, delivered by whoever, for whatever, wherever, at the right time, recorded, shared, and all of this will be done using the electronic healthcare record. With Ian Robson on leadership, we've looked at lots of inspirational quotes, but I think this is the one, that the message I would most want to give our students and our future students, is to never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So I really am grateful to the students for taking part in the programme, and will be even more grateful to them for the work that they're going to do for Kuwait. Thank you very much.
Over that period of time, a clinical skills facility has been established, is up and running, is impressive. I have to tell you the big difference between the skills facility here and the one in Dundee is that there is natural daylight here and that you have a view of the sea. In Dundee, the facility has got the same setup, the same rigour, the same ability to deliver clinical skills to a range of professionals, but unfortunately there are no windows. So you've got one major asset that we don't have. We've also developed a learning zone, which is extremely impressive. And I get a sense that there is an acceleration of the process of developing diabetes care in the Dusman Institute and developing this network that will deliver better health to the population of Kuwait. And probably my starting off point is to I guess, return to what Mary was saying at the end. That the real benefit here is not necessarily setting up a skills network or setting up an education facility, but improving healthcare for the population, preventing the development of long-term conditions and helping patients manage their conditions better, empowering patients to deal with diabetes. And I hope that you share my vision that diabetes is the starting off point, but that in time this approach will benefit other long-term conditions for the people of Kuwait and people of Scotland, because this is a partnership that we share together. This is not Dundee imposing a model on Kuwait or Kuwait imposing a model on Dundee. This is something that we're developing together. I guess we will make mistakes from time to time, but only by doing that can we benefit and move forward. I guess provide a welcome from the University of Dundee to all of old friends, new friends and colleagues in Dusman, and to say how pleased I am that the formal launch of the education facility has now started. Of course, things have been moving forward over the last year with discovery courses, etc. But we now have something tangible in terms of certificates, diplomas and master's courses and modules underway, and that's enormously encouraging. And I was astounded and very encouraged at the number of people applying for the very first set of courses. And I guess it's always reassuring. It's always a worry when you throw a party that people might not turn up. And it was not, in this case, a worry that was going to ever happen, I think. Dundee in the School of Medicine, and what we do in Dundee, and of course colleagues from Dundee will recognise this. Some colleagues from Dusman will also recognise, because they've been to Dundee, what happens. But I thought I'd remind you that the University of Dundee, we like to think, is a leading research and teaching institution. We are within the top 150 ranked universities in the world. In some areas, pharmacology, we are first in the world in terms of research citations and output. So we're, I think, really ahead of the game in some areas. And we're fourth ranked in the world as a place to work in biomedical science. So we can't offer necessarily the sunshine and the heat in Kuwait, but we can offer some other things. And we have major strengths in translational research, particularly in the School of Medicine, in metabolic and cardiovascular disease, and therefore it's very appropriate that we have this link with Kuwait, where again there are major strengths in diabetes, and of course a major challenge in terms of managing diabetes and preventing its development in the future. We also have major strengths and interests in other areas too, including cancer. School of Medicine is part of a College of Medicine, Dentistry and Nursing. And all the schools engage in undergraduate professional education, postgraduate teaching and research. And again, Mary alluded to the notion that increasingly we need to be interdisciplinary in our approach to learning. And I know that an ambition of my colleague Jean Kerr is that we increasingly teach our students together so that they learn as teams, as undergraduates, because that's how they're going to work in the future in postgraduate life. Doctors don't work in silos, nor do nurses or pharmacists or nutritionists. We work together as a college and a university and a medical school with our partners in the National Health Service. And everything that we do in terms of teaching and research is dependent on that very close relationship. And I'm delighted that Carrie Marr is here today. She is Director of Quality for NHS Tayside. And Carrie will be talking tomorrow a little bit about how we were developing our notions of managing quality in healthcare delivery, and how there is a research agenda and an education agenda that impacts on that. Subscribe to. And this is the vision really of our principal, Professor Pete Downs. And when he became principal, he articulated three key concepts for the university: excellence, focus and impact. But I think these are good concepts for the interaction that we have between the Dusman Institute and the Medical School in Dundee. Because everything that I've seen here, and everything that I hope will happen in the future, will carry with it excellence. There's focus in relation to what we do with education, and I'll come to research in a minute. And impact. And impact is really what happens as a result, because I said earlier, there's no point in us setting up courses, or setting up skills networks, or even setting up clinical information systems if they don't have an impact on real patients. We can do all that, and it's worthless unless patients have better quality of care and they're empowered to take control of their own disease. Apply to everything that we do clinically, everything that we do in research, everything that we do in postgraduate training, and everything that we do for undergraduate teaching and learning. And I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking a little bit about our research agenda, because it seems to me that there was a tripartite development that was designed when the initial notion of the interaction between Kuwait and Scotland was talked about. It was going to be based on clinical informatics, education and training, but also on research. Because it is only through research that I think that we might better understand how to address some of the issues of preventing diabetes, managing it better. And there's an enormous opportunity working together between Dundee and Kuwait to develop a research agenda, exploiting the enormous burden of disease that there is here, and exploiting the wealth of resource both here and in Dundee to manage a very powerful research development. So in Dundee, in the medical school, we have a medical research institute. Andrew Morris is co-director of that research institute, and as I said earlier, it has major interests in diabetes and cardiovascular disease, population health sciences, cancer and neurosciences. We have a close relationship with the College of Life Sciences and the university, which is a major world-famous biomedical institution, which will actually be the focus of our cancer research. And the building next to it is our clinical research facility. And a key component of our research strengths is the clinical research support. This is the Tayside Academic Medical Sciences Centre. And I'm going to say a little bit about research infrastructure and how that's vital to manage research effectively. Education we've talked about already. Medical Education Institute, Jean Kerr is a director of that, has an international reputation for innovation in undergraduate and postgraduate teaching, particularly developing interprofessional education, pioneering use of clinical and communication skills, and again the Clinical Skills Centre is here as a testament to that, and developing modular postgraduate programmes, some of which are based on distance learning. And again, some of the modules that have been developed here build on that experience. So what about our engagement with Dusman? Well, in Dundee, I said we have a medical education institute and a medical research institute, and they work closely together to deliver clinical care, training and research. It was my vision that for Dusman, we should have a two-way relationship so that there is interaction for clinical care, and we've got that in the development of the health informatics programs, which are up and running, postgraduate training, which we heard about from Mary, and research, which I'll say a little bit about. So again, what are the platforms that allow us to be successful in research, particularly in relation to diabetes in Dundee, which I believe are also present in this institute? Well, firstly, staff. It goes without saying that we can have as many facilities and instruments as we want, but unless we have talented faculty to carry out research, we will be worthless. In Dundee, we have now, I think, begun to look hard at how we recruit staff, how we retain high quality staff, and how we ensure that staff focus on the best quality of research that we can do. And I would be very happy to talk afterwards about how we might try to share the same sort of approach in terms of recruitment, retention and training of staff. Facilities. Again, we have high quality research facilities both here and in Dundee. Both here and in Dundee, there are high quality laboratory facilities and clinical research facilities. So we can't complain that we don't have the infrastructure to manage research. And I said earlier that the key to our success in Dundee has been close engagement with the National Health Service as a research partner. And I think that's vital for work in Dusman as well, because research can only happen if there are close engagements with cohorts of patients, volunteers, families, and that ability to engage with a healthcare delivery system is essential for research. And a research institute that is not embedded in a clinical context, I think, is valueless. And that's what is present in Dusman, a research institute within a clinical context. And uniquely, I think, in Dundee, we have had internationally recognised in health and excellence in health informatics for quite a long time. And it's that ability to derive information from patients, populations, and ask questions of them in research terms that is extremely powerful. And I'll give you one example of that. Because what we really say as a research strength is major expertise in health informatics, and that of course is now being rolled out, as Kaظم said, across Kuwait, and will increasingly become an important tool as all the governments have health informatics embedded in the healthcare system. Well, Andrew mentioned earlier that one of the similarities between Kuwait and Scotland was the use of the ability to have a unique identifier. In Kuwait it's the civil ID number, in Scotland it's the community health index number. And I have to let you into a secret here, as long as you don't copy this down, that this belongs to one person in this room. And basically the CAI number, is he going to volunteer? This is Andrew Morrissey's CAI number, so you can now rush off. He's given me permission to say this. And what it gives you is his date of birth, so his birthday is coming up shortly. This is Andrew's gender. He's a 02. So again, you can work out the 02 we think is male. Is that right, Andrew? Good, I've got that one right. And then there's a check, did you tip the act? Now, every person in Scotland has a CHI number, and that allows us to use that index as a way of extracting an enormous amount of powerful information, because that can be linked to prescribing information, it can be linked to healthcare consultations and outcomes. It can be linked to deaths, for example. And I'll show you one example of how that was used to generate a hypothesis, make an important discovery that actually has long-term healthcare implications. And this arose out of work carried out by Andrew in collaboration with Dario Alessi and Graham Hardy in Dundee. And they identified that metformin was a drug commonly used in the treatment of diabetes that affected the activity of AMP kinase. And the AMP kinase was regulated by this protein kinase LKB1, which is a tumour suppressor. And the question arose was whether or not the use of metformin, because it affects a tumour suppressor, might be associated with a reduced risk of cancer in patients with type 2 diabetes. Now, because you've got information on prescribing, high numbers that allow you to look at cancer incidence, because all patients who come to hospital with cancer will have a patient episode recorded, that allowed one to look to see whether there was indeed a change in the risk of cancer in patients taking metformin. And if you focus on the right hand of this slide, you can see that if patients ever had been exposed to metformin, there was a very substantial reduction in the risk of cancer. So that was the hypothesis that was tested, proved to be positive, and that study has since been repeated elsewhere, and there is increasing and quite powerful data to show that metformin use is associated with reduced risk of a range of cancers, including prostate and colorectal, but also, interestingly, can be used as adjuvant therapy and may reduce the risk of recurrence of some cancers after successful treatment. Pearson, a colleague of Andrew's in Dundee, then went on to look at whether or not response to metformin might be identified in a genome-wide association study. So again, taking DNA from a large part of the population, looking at patients prescribed metformin and identifying those who responded to the drug based on change in hemoglobin A1C, Ewan was able to identify a locus within, this is a Manhattan plot, a locus here during a genome-wide association study associated with response to metformin. And this locus turns out almost certainly to be associated with a gene that's associated with risk of ataxia telangiectasia. But interestingly, that gene is also associated with risk of developing cancer. So it's a neat story that metformin use reduces the risk of cancer, but when you look at it in molecular terms, it turns out that there's a biological explanation for that. And that's an example of how very powerful research is made possible by the use of health informatics, allied to good laboratory science, and allows one to generate and test hypotheses on populations. And that's the sort of discovery science that is possible, I think, in Kuwait, increasingly as health informatics rolls out, large population available, very good health information and clinical care systems, and high quality laboratory facilities, and what I said right at the start, dedicated, motivated and high quality staff. So a huge opportunity for us. And it would be nice if this could be said of Kuwait and Scotland in the future. This is Mark Walport, who's director of the Wellcome Trust. And Walport said that if you live in Dundee, he said this in relation to diabetes care, you have recently been participating in a medical revolution. So it would be nice to extend the revolution to the interaction between Dusman and the University of Dundee. And I appreciate I'm the only person standing between everyone here and lunch, so I'll not spend too much longer. But I wanted just to say a little bit about research infrastructure, because I think that's important for us, about how we manage research effectively. At Tayside, we have a joint entity between the NHS and the university called the Tayside Academic Health Sciences Centre, or TASC. And that manages a number of components, and I think all of these components are important elements that can be present in the Dusman Institute. Some are, some I think might benefit from further development. And that's something which I think can be managed jointly as partners between Dundee and Kuwait. That task manages our tissue bank, clinical trials unit, research centre, research imaging, and all of our research governance and support. Tissue Bank has been in existence since 1997. It now holds about 47,000 tissue samples from a whole range of pathologies. Tissue Bank also will be the repository for all of our DNA collections, but it's a way of ensuring that tissue and biological samples are managed securely and effectively, with proper governance, and so that we don't waste precious resources inappropriately. Since July 2006, the Tissue Bank has supported nearly 140 projects, and it's staffed appropriately with research scientists, research nurses who collect tissue and manage the infrastructure. And that's allowed the Tissue Bank to contribute to some important publications, many around cancer, but increasingly in the future, I think we will use the Tissue Bank with its DNA resources to answer questions about metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, and other illnesses. And if you're interested, you can actually look at our Tissue Bank website. It's part of the University of Dundee website, and you search under Tissue Bank and you can get to it. Our clinical trials unit is an important nationally registered unit which provides advice on the design and management of clinical trials. And gone are the days of people setting up clinical trials, if you like, on the back of an envelope without proper consultation first. Clinical trials unit monitors compliance with the regulations for studies. A lot of researchers complain about red tape and bureaucracy and how clinical trials and clinical studies are managed. I think that's inappropriate. I think we need good governance, good guidelines, and effective management of these to ensure that patients are protected in studies and that studies actually deliver clear outcomes. There's nothing worse than clinical trials that are badly conducted and give rise to outcomes that are uninterpretable. Trials unit supports investigators in recruitment, performance and analysis of outcomes, and is part of a national network. And there may be sense in thinking about how clinical trials can best be supported in the future in Dusman, with a framework that helps investigators put together studies so that investigators are freed up from some of the, if you like, not necessarily drudgery, but routine work in terms of study design, statistical analysis, etc. Supports staff and provides facilities to carry out clinical research. It's important because it ensures that clinical studies are carried out to a uniform standard of good clinical practice. And again, gone are the days when people carry out clinical studies, if you like, in their offices or in ward side rooms. It's, I think, important that clinical research and patients are protected and that studies are carried out in a safe and quality-controlled environment. And the last important element that our Academic Health Sciences Centre provides is research governance and support. Both here and in Scotland, all clinical research requires ethical permission, and it's one of the duties of the research governance and support to ensure that ethical permission has been granted. The ethical permission is granted independently by an ethics committee, but it's important that someone makes sure that that permission is in place before research actually takes place. The research governance part of TASC also manages the process of costing research, allocating resources so that research is properly supported. And again, there's nothing worse to my mind than people setting off with studies that can't be delivered because there isn't an appropriate resource to deliver them in the future. And again, there's an important element of monitoring the performance of studies in relation to good clinical practice. And that's part of a Scottish network. And it's important that there's effective but not obstructive research ethics and governance. Issues such as patient confidentiality, data confidentiality, management of tissue effectively are all vital. And I think getting that infrastructure right is absolutely essential if, both in Dundee and in Kuwait, we're going to prosper and thrive as research organisations. I mentioned securing tissue and patient data management, and that requires infrastructure. It doesn't just happen. And managing anonymisation, access to data, Security of data on servers, again, is something that needs to be actively managed. It doesn't happen by default. Clinical research facilities need to be managed to good clinical practice standards, just as clinical skills facilities do. And it's important that there is effective support for research trial design, implementation and analysis. Equally important is cooperation among clinicians, research managers, laboratory staff, because research is not a solitary activity, it's a team activity, just as we talked about teamwork in clinical care. Research is a team approach as well. Most importantly, patients. Research, to my mind, can't be carried out in a vacuum, and we can only do it if we have, again, research facilities and research infrastructure embedded in a clinical context. So I'll finish. I've just put up a few questions, and I don't expect to get the answers today, but it's really just perhaps to set an agenda for future discussion about how we might best build joint research capacity between Dusman and Dundee, because between us we have got enormous resources, both in terms of infrastructure, cohorts, staff and intellect, and we must exploit these to ensure that we drive research forward. It's possible that I think we could share expertise on building research infrastructure and capacity. I think it might be worth thinking about whether there are some joint projects that we could begin to develop rapidly as exemplars for research, because I think it's important that we demonstrate that we do have a tripartite setup that builds on education, clinical care and informatics, and research. And really, just as a final thought, whether we should think about developing a PhD programme to consolidate cooperation and research. So I leave you with these 4 areas of thought for maybe discussion over lunch, and just finish by saying shukran.
Yes, with the mannequin, you can do a lot of different examinations, you can do a lot of procedures. The procedures could include listening to the chest sounds, the heart sounds. Also, it's used for IV access, which is very handy in many of the procedures. Also, he does have the capabilities of sweating, so depending on the scenario, we can actually have the mannequin sweating. You can do blood pressure, so he's used for many different scenarios, for medics, for nurses. It's really very, very useful material, teaching material.